So thank you everyone for joining us today for our first event as part of Birmingham Tech Week. It's a new session that we've started to do on a regular basis in Engineering Insight. So we are recording today's session. We do want you to ask as many questions as you want to, so do use the Q&A functionality. And without further ado, I will hand over to Lee to lead today's session.
Excellent, thank you, Karen. Yeah, just to echo that, we're super excited to be part of Birmingham Tech Week now that BGSS have opened an office there. Not that we've been in it very much recently, but you know, having the presence has been excellent. Before I introduce the panel, the sort of purpose of these engineering insights is across BGSS we have, you know, over 1,000 consultants that have worked on a variety of projects over sort of the past 25, 27 years. I kind of lose count, and with a whole wealth of experience that's we just kind of want to share. So rather than talking about the hype and saying, oh, you should be using X technology, you should be using Y technology, say, well, actually we've used those and this is bad for this reason, this is good for this reason, and oh, actually maybe you might want to think about this. So today we're talking about mobile development and specifically hybrid versus native mobile development. So I've got an expert panel with me that are here to share their views and also the views of the rest of BGSS and Spark. But before we get into that panel, do you want to introduce yourself? Leonie, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, hello, I'm Leonie. I work for Spark, which is the design and innovation consultancy within BGSS. I work across service design, human-centered design, user experience, content design, etc. And you know, really sort of making sure that what we're doing, what we're developing, really works for the people who are going to use it, be they internal users or customers and external users of a product.
Great. Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm the user interface development capability lead for the Leeds office of BGSS. So basically a developer with a web focus and UI focus.
Awesome. And Colin?
So I'm Colin. I am a developer / software developer in test and have many years of building mobile apps, which is quite fun.
Excellent. So I guess before we kick off, in all seriousness, there might be a few people that are watching that don't know what a native mobile app is or a hybrid mobile app. So Joe, I've put you on the spot before, so this should be well rehearsed. Can you, in a sort of 2-sentence high-level overview, explain what we mean by a native mobile app?
I think I'd have this memorized by now, but I don't. Okay, so a native app is an app that is written in a language that's native to that platform and compiled to machine code that is understood by that platform. So, for example, writing in Swift or Objective-C for a Apple device. Hybrid apps take the approach of having a cross-device language, which is then either compiled down to the machine code for that language or acts as is hosted by the native platform in some kind of web skin or something like that. So basically, mobile app, native app, you write specifically for that device, while as a hybrid app, you can write once and then it can be deployed onto different types of device.
Awesome. Right. So now everybody knows that's watching what the difference is. I want to do a poll, so a bit of interactivity. I know it's lunchtime. Put your sandwiches down. And there's only 5 questions, I think. 5 questions, or maybe 6. Are you in a technical role, just so we can get a bit of a steer on that? And which would be your preferred choice? Do you prefer hybrid development, native development? Do you not know? Does it depend? Do you actually prefer developing with something else that we're not talking about here? And then just how many sort of projects you've been involved in. Hopefully, and the panel can vote as well, I think. We're starting to get some results in now.
Not allowed to vote.
No, I had a go, and then the message was at the bottom, which you didn't notice straight away from a design point of view. But it says hosts and panelists can't vote. So we're just
okay. Well, to be honest, I'm going to ask you individually for your views at the end, so we'll come on to that.
Are you going to play some countdown music on your guitars?
I might just hum if that's all right. So we've got a lot of people in non-technical roles actually so far, so this will be interesting. I think it's relatively low-ish numbers, so they might be skewed slightly. So when we get the results in, I'll compare them to one that we polled internally at BGSS as well. Right, I'm going to give it 5 seconds. Press the buttons. 4, 3, 2,
1.
Right, that's it. Poll over. So what are the results? So we've got most people, sort of 67-ish%, that aren't in a technical role. And it's a complete split between native and hybrid, both with 33% each. 17% don't know, 17% it depends. So this is going to be an interesting debate. In fact, what I might do is, because it is such a split, after our conversation, after our Q&A, so please ask some questions, we might run just that second question again to see which one you prefer at the end and see whether we've managed to either convince you or change your mind or educate in some way. So let's do that at the end, but let's just have a bit of a discussion first. So Leonie, I know that you've been involved in a number of mobile apps yourself and a lot of your colleagues in Spark. What's your sort of views of the rest of your colleagues and yourself on native and hybrid mobile development?
I think if we were looking at it purely from a user experience, it would have to be native. But because we are aware that situations and requirements vary, then there are times when I would say, yes, it's okay not to be native. But for us, it's if you're designing it and making it as human-centered design based as possible, the familiarity of how you use your own phone. I know if I'm an iPhone user, and if you put me on an Android, I'm going, oh, where's the buttons and how do I do this and how do I do that? So if you're going to do hybrid, it's got to be really good to replace that native experience, would be my opinion. And I think optimizing the product for that familiarity is really, really important and can actually totally drive the user experience that people may get frustrated if they don't have that. So yeah, I'd probably say I'm on the native side, but I understand why not native. So
you made an interesting point there about making it feel familiar. I guess this is maybe one for Joe. How do you feel in development when it comes to replicating that sort of user experience and that native feel on a hybrid application? Is it actually more effort, or what does that kind of look like?
So I think it's achievable to sort of layer on the differences between the devices, but it's never going to be as perfect a fit as relying on the native kind of toolkits and things to help you craft that. I don't know, Colin, what's been your experience in that kind of area?
Yeah, so when I've worked with React Native, essentially there's a lot of I guess kind of libraries that attempt to bring in some of that kind of isomorphic kind of components. So for instance, the date picker might be the wheels that you get in iOS, or it might be like a pop-up modal that you get in Android. And they do quite a good job, but then it's kind of up to the developer. So sometimes people might not want to use those, or sometimes they'll use them, but they'll use them incorrectly because obviously it's a kind of a free thing for them to try with.
So you said React Native there. So this is a bit of a kind of anomaly, right? So I think internally at BGSS, we've discussed it many times, and we would class React Native as a hybrid technology, but it actually does render, that native UI. So you are getting that native UI components, but not necessarily experience of the way they kind of piece together and that kind of thing. So back to Leonie, does it matter? Like when you're testing with the users and you put maybe a native and a hybrid app in their hands, like how much difference does it make, and can the users notice, and what's your experiences there?
Oh, when we do usability testing, we would always try and understand what phone a user uses, and have them have a version of it. So have an Android and have an iPhone. It might not be the exact one, but at least it's there's the level of familiarity. So it helps you understand if you've got sort of say 6 or 8 users and you've got three of each, you can actually start seeing little patterns. So if they're getting stuck on something because it isn't native, it can identify that fairly quickly. I think if you test a user on a phone they're not familiar with, you're not getting the right view anyway. But I think there's certain functionalities that can be more generic, say an appointment booking system or something like that, because they're not part of that specifically of a native tool set anyway. Whereas actually things like date picker and things like that, which are really, you know, familiar interactions, and it doesn't mean people can't always use them. If they're done well, they can probably use them anyway. But if they're not done very well and then they're not familiar, that's when you might come into sort of issues.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You mentioned date picker there. So date picker is a sort of classic example of, you can have a native date picker even in a, you know, a Cordova, Ionic, whatever it might be app, because you can kind of cross over that native bridge, which is kind of why it's called a hybrid. Joe, what are your experiences of using sort of plugins and open source tooling for hybrid apps?
Varied would be probably the best thing. So, I mean, one of the good things about the sort of the hybrid ecosystems things, if you can start leaning on web technology and things, is it's such a huge ecosystem of off-the-shelf libraries and things which you can then integrate into your products. But the downside of that is it's such a huge ecosystem of off-the-shelf products. So doing the right sort of due diligence and making sure that you can get the thing and hammer it into your app and that it'll work under all circumstances. Often these things look good when you first look at them until you start trying to sort of use them and test them and realize that it doesn't work backwards on a Tuesday and you need it to work backwards on a Tuesday. So I think that's where the limitations come in. So a lot of these things, the sort of recurring theme, I guess, with hybrid versus native is that in theory they should be the same. In practice they're not, and it's knowing where the practical differences are that I think the challenge is.
Yeah, it's kind of common in a lot of off-the-shelf open source packages. It gets you sort of 90% there, but that 10% actually, you might as well have written the whole thing natively sometimes, and the supportability of it, and you know, the open source developers disappeared off the face of the planet, and there's a new version of iOS coming. And I don't know, Colin, what's your experience of testing such apps with open source components?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of, you know, open source stuff, all of the testing tooling I use is open source. So it's kind of like, you know, there is a side of kind of, yeah, I really support open source and it's amazing stuff. But at the same time, as you say, like the kind of maintenance and the team behind those tools, they need to be really good. Luckily, like tools like Appium are quite well supported. I think they've got a lot of like corporate buy-in for that, and that's kind of what's key for that type of community. But yeah, I mean, you know, again, go back to React Native, a lot of the components you get in there, they are kind of one-man teams, you know, that are just doing stuff to get stuff that they want off the ground. So you do end up with situations where, for instance, even if it is maintained and it works on the latest and greatest, a lot of the paradigms that are used for coding in React Native, such as like Redux or hooks or all that kind of stuff, changes a lot. So while you might kind of be able to grab a component and, you know, and it works like for a month, suddenly you might find that, you know, React Native decides, oh, well, not necessarily it decides, but, you know, the kind of community decides we're doing things like this now. And then you're stuck trying to port this thing. But, you know, it's open source, right? So you could then push your thing up and contribute and let other people use it. So, you know, depending on the situation you're in, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, React Native upgrades, I think we've all been through that, especially with React upgrades at the same time and breaking every single component because they just made a, you know, breaking change which impacts everything and all your third-party libraries as well.
Yeah, especially when they put it through as a minor version. They need to learn how to use semantic version.
I think what's interesting though is we're talking about these things, but I think it really is the context of what the app's for is really important, because I know we've talked about this ourselves internally, but I've worked for a very large pharmaceutical retailer, and in the States they really concentrated on their native products because they wanted to be the top retail app in the States, and they thought it was really important that they had product owners for Android and product owner for Apple for their app, and they really concentrated on it. Whereas actually I've worked on projects where the app is just for a very specific set of, say, internal organization users, and then they may have decided which device they're going to be working on, and therefore they only need that product to work on, you know, a tablet, be it Android or Apple. So sometimes you need the context of how widely is it being used and who's using it, and therefore what's the best decision from a practical and an economic sort of point of view, as well as a user experience point of view.
Yes, it depends what functionality looks like, and I'm not just talking about which components. You know, I've worked on an app before where it was React Native, Colin, and we had to cross over that native bridge from JavaScript to the native component regularly to update an element that couldn't be pre-computed, and that's a really expensive operation. And even though the app looked like it, you know, would be sensible React Native app, because of the way that it was updating, it actually became a significant kind of drawback, and we had to change the component. So I guess it's not just a case of it's for this industry, it's probably this thing, or it's a nice list app, it's React Native. There's actually a lot more kind of considerations in that. I don't know, Joe, what your experiences are, or experiences from your team.
Yes, I think that the key thing is what is the context that you're writing it for. So, I mean, a project we've been involved in recently, they were relying heavily on a third-party iOS library, yet the application itself is effectively a hybrid, and trying to integrate with that SDK that they use, make sure that we can keep our look and feel in line with the components that they're providing, when some of it's native and some of it's more sort of web-based technology is a struggle. So
I've not really thought about that before, because you've kind of got your native library, then you've got your wrapper around it, then you've got your like Cordova or something around that, then you've got Ionic or something around that, and in there somewhere you've got, you know, JavaScript libraries and all the rest of it, and npm black hole. So yeah, actually there's a lot of complexity there of things that can go wrong and need upgrading.
But I mean, just to go back to the sort of the point of the context, I think one thing which sort of came up repeatedly when we're asking people internally about which way to go with this is to be absolutely sure you need an app in the first place.
Is your favorite quote, that one?
Yeah.
I think what was the phrase that you got that was coined? I can't remember. Do you even need an app?
Yeah.
I think that's
that, or do you even need an app for that, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes back to mobile experiences, which was a point that you made on the podcast that we did, Leonie, around, you know, picking the right tools for the job and making sure that you're actually satisfying whatever it is you're trying to achieve and provide that user value. And that could be an app, it might not be, it might be a progressive web app, which I know you're a massive fan of, Joe. Or it could be, you know, that we're in a particular country where they don't have smartphones. So, you know, one of our customers, they do mobile top-ups via SMS. It's not even really a mobile app, is it? So it's about the mobile experience.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we do a lot of work around digital inclusion, and that sort of, you know, that goes across sort of people's ability to do things, but it's also can be financial and access to the technology. Just to download an app, have you got space on your phone to do that? Whereas actually you can always generally access a website, although, you know, from a data point of view and from sort of being near Wi-Fi and things like that. So there's things like that you need to consider as well. And sometimes what we found with users is they don't always know if they're on an app or if they're on a website anyway, especially when you get an app that sends off to part of a website, like in banking or something like that, and they may not sort of actually know what's really happened, and they think they're in the same place, but in fact they've gone off to the web platform. So because often they look quite similar now. So it's what is the Joe's exactly right on, like, what is the need for this product in the first place. I know, like, I shop on Amazon, like probably most people do, and I have the app, but I also have the website downloaded on my phone, and I sit them next to each other. And I often do things on the app and then I go across onto the website because it takes money for a charity that I'm interested in, you know. So it's like, you know, people have very weird behaviors as users, don't they? So it's really thinking, what's the purpose of the app? What's it there to do? Why is it a better experience than you would get in a different way, as to why you'd have one in the first place, definitely.
Yeah, I wanted to jump on something you said in the middle there about, do you have the app installed? We were working for a retailer enabling Instagram as a sales channel.
Yeah.
And by pressing on the sort of buy button, what you want is a website effectively, because then you're not having to go off to the app store to download an app and break that sort of sales cycle. And I mean, simple decisions like that, people kind of forget, and it's a bit disjointed. They don't think about that kind of joined up experience.
Well, it's often the stickiness of the product. We call it stickiness, as in, like, how frequently are you going to use it? I mean, banking apps have become so successful because people use them fairly frequently, and they're paying each other and they're looking and checking, you know, statements, etc., etc. I've worked on other products where I've worked on not the COVID app for the NHS, but I worked on the NHS app, which is around booking appointments and access to your medical history and the ability to get prescriptions, etc. And it's really interesting doing that research, because people who have ill health, people who are on long-term medication, etc., etc., the app is really valuable to them. But people who are fit and bright and well, having the app there to make the odd appointment once or twice a year doesn't have much value to them. So why put it on your phone? So the stickiness of a product is a really important thing as to whether it's worth investing in an app.
You mentioned the COVID app there, a topic I was trying to steer clear of. So I'm going to ask Colin a difficult question. So effectively, it's coming back to this: is an app the right thing? When you think about the sort of security and privacy and making sure that the thing is tested to be secure, when we're looking at, you know, enterprise or national critical infrastructure apps, like what are the differences between native and hybrid? Is one better than the other, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the technology being used. So, you know, we've covered off that, yeah, essentially React Native, you do kind of get a lot of the native functionality. And yeah, like your Cordova, I've written my fair share amount of Objective-C to kind of, you know, hash some stuff together. I guess it's really down to what the developer is actually attempting to do. If they are, you know, relying quite heavily on those lower level frameworks, then you pretty much can kind of, you know, I'm going to say piggyback, but yeah, you know, you can basically piggyback off the work that you've done to kind of verify that they are working correctly. Mm-hmm. But then, yeah, you've kind of got the bridge, and you've got to hope that that bridge, you know, it is kind of, I guess, implemented in a way that, yeah, it does honor some of the more secure settings that are being set up. I mean, I don't have experience with testing the bridge. But I'm sure, you know, especially with React Native, it being Facebook and whatnot, there's probably a fair amount of work that's been taken into kind of making sure that that's not doing. But I did actually, going off the notion of kind of like, if an app is worth it, like, you know, if you actually want to use an app or not. One of the anti-patterns that I've seen recently, which is, yeah, kind of annoying to me, is the fact that if you have an app installed and you just, like, for instance, YouTube, you click on the YouTube link and you want to watch it in the browser, but it takes you into the app. That, and again, is one of those, yeah, it might mean that the app's a bit sticky, you know, in the sense that you come back into it, but I don't want to come into it. And then I guess that's, you know, another thing to consider, isn't it?
That's the reason I don't have the Amazon app on my on my phone.
So yeah, I guess, yeah, the deep linking or you know, the schema where you can open up an app or push them out to the App Store is obviously something that companies want to do, but are they actually just annoying their users by doing it? Sounds like, you know, from our experiences, then maybe that is the case. So you don't use the Amazon app, Joe, you use the website.
I use the website for Amazon, yes, rather
And
than the
is
app.
that the only reason, or are there other reasons?
The website is good enough. I don't feel the need to have an app for Amazon. I can go in and look at things, and they'll send me an email when I order things. So
Do you use it on your phone, or do you use it on a tablet? Or
I suppose, to be fair, and so normally when I'm interacting with Amazon, I will be using a laptop or something like that, because I want to be able to see a big picture of what it is I'm going to buy and all that kind of thing. So
yeah, that is another reason why people may not want to use apps is if pictures, pictures are important when you're researching the size of something. But I mean, I don't really.
But, I mean, we are moving into a world now, with edge compute and AI machine learning. So you can see the clothing on yourself if using an app for, some shopping channels. There's advantages to having native apps for things like that, and tapping into the local compute and using the camera.
Well, yeah, but you can do all that on the web nowadays as well.
Yeah, but on the web, can you get notifications and look at the guy running around your block of flats waiting for your package to be delivered? I mean, that's the unique selling point for me.
But Joe, were you saying that that Amazon is actually a hybrid? Did you say Amazon's?
I don't know what the
I think Instagram is a hybrid.
Instagram is a hybrid,
isn't it? Yeah. So I mean, there's a perfect example of where probably people are happy on Instagram and they haven't noticed it's not native, and there's probably quite a lot of those examples around, aren't there?
Yeah, Instagram did a weird thing though. They had a lot of functionality in the app, which technically you could have on the website, and it took them ages to pull it over, like things like messaging and stuff like that. So, even if you are kind of, I guess, juggling that website versus app thing, you've got to make sure that the kind of feature set is on parity,
Yeah, and I think that is another big thing. I mean, we're going a bit off like native versus hybrid, but actually phone functionality is a really, it's looking at where the benefits of the phone functionality really assist an app, sort of, when it was sort of bringing in barcode scanning and QR codes and face recognition and sort of all those things that made apps more popular in a way, just because of the functionality that they could integrate with the phone with.
I'm going to jump in there, Leonie, just because we're going to start questions, and this is pretty much the first question. So Fiona asked a bit earlier, what about native versus hybrids in other kinds of functionality like location and camera? So I think we've all got views on that, and what's available in both. So I don't know if Joe, you want to give us a tech view of it.
So things like location and camera, the support that is out there for them in native apps, in hybrid apps, and in web apps. You can do all those things in all of them at the moment. The differentiator is how reliable the integration is, I think. And so, for example, even things like Touch ID, there are APIs to use on the web now to do that. But does your browser support it? Does it work reliably well, as these things are sort of baked into the expectations of what people get from apps at the moment? So on the sort of app versus web thing, I think it's while it's possible on the web, it makes people expect it more on the app side of things. Then when it comes to the sort of hybrid versus native, I think it's having that one extra step of remove away from the native code does mean that as you mentioned, we're sort of upgrading versions of React Native and that kind of thing. A new version of the iOS comes out, and suddenly people are scrabbling around to make sure things can still integrate and all that kind of thing. Whereas if you're using the native code, which is effectively working, is released in sync with the new versions of iOS and that kind of thing, it's going to be a much smoother experience.
Yeah. Colin, when you're testing things, I know you mentioned Appium earlier. Would you use Appium for native and hybrid and a progressive web app, or what does that testing suite look like?
Yeah, so I would, I mean, for me, Appium's kind of, I guess it's a hammer and everything looks like a nail. I mean, it's basically kind of similar to Selenium in the sense, it's got the same protocol, it just works with apps, which means that you can do it, you can use it to drive automation for apps, websites, if you've got a web view in an app, you can also make it essentially jump into that context and automate, web views within apps. some of the other tools that you get, especially kind of more on the React Native side as well, things like Detox, you know, they are closer to the hybrid layer. So you can do, you know, some fancy stuff to kind of set up your app in ways, but at the same time, you sacrifice some of the kind of flexibility, especially, you know, if we're talking about the need to essentially rewrite things, you know, being tied to one framework that can't do a lot when it's not in a particular context is not a great thing. So yeah, Appian's very much a great tool.
Interesting, actually, because something I find really annoying is when you're on an app and because it knows, actually when it knows your device, it will open you up in like Maps rather than Google Maps. And as much as I've got an iPhone, I prefer Google Maps to Maps. So, you know, sometimes you're actually not getting what you want because it might be native, which is quite interesting.
Well, in my view, app developers should, you know, iterate around what mapping tools or apps are installed and give the user the option.
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
not.
Yeah.
Okay, well, another one about testing tools. So, can you tell us the names of software and tools used for development? So, I guess this is one for you, Joe. What's your go-to for hybrid and go-to for native, or are they the same?
Well, so if you're writing native, you'll be using Xcode for iOS and the Android equivalent, which I can't remember the name of. Thank you. While as if you're going hybrid, I suppose this is where you can start to tap into the wider setup. So I think some of the frameworks have their own IDEs, while as others you can fall back to the likes of Xcode. Not Xcode, my brain's just gone by, Visual Studio Code, sorry, to be, and then you sort of into the what is your comfy pair of slippers IDE that you can use cross-platform.
Text edit.
If you want to be one of those Vi programmers, you go for it.
I guess, yeah, you mentioned other IDEs. You got like Xamarin Studio, which is you know, the sort of Microsoft product that does the cross compilation to both. But even those IDEs themselves as well. Like, imagine you're a developer for Xamarin, and there's a new version of Xcode coming out all the time, and you've got to keep up that sort of feature parity. And guess what? They're a little bit late on their release, and you need to upgrade for your new version of iOS. You've created another kind of third party that's a dependency there. So you've not all just got all these layers here. You've actually got layers in your tooling and your IDs as well that are potential bottlenecks and blockers. Yeah,
you also forgot the bit where you've got to make sure your Mac's also up to date if you're working on Xcode. That's the big pain.
Which has hit me in the past with, you know, using a corporate Mac, and therefore has to wait for our IT department to agree that the latest version of the operating system can be rolled out and usable, but you can't get the latest Xcode, which you need for X feature kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't compromise on sort of security and ever really, especially.
No, I'm not. That wasn't a criticism. Wonderful IT guy. It's just a low-level frustration.
Yeah, no, I get it. Right, well, a few more questions here. How do long and short-term product roadmaps affect the decision to go native or not? Oh, that's a good one. So I guess this is the product roadmaps internally of your app, or is it the product roadmaps of the native frameworks, or the potential tooling that you're using, like React Native? Probably answer in two different ways. So yeah, I guess from my perspective, we've done a lot, and this is maybe one for you, Leonie. When we first start out writing apps, it's a quicker feedback cycle to do a hybrid app, and we're not really too concerned about what the functionality in the future will be, because we're trying to get something in the hands of the users to try and test whether, you know, it's a viable app in the first place, or if we want an app, and sort of test and make that hybrid versus native decision. Is that something that you would agree with and your colleagues would?
I think if it's a proof of concept, some sort of proof of concept, then what you're trying to do is proving that there's value in it in the first place. I think if you're looking at your strategy as a business or an organization, and your roadmap is especially around personalization, maybe if you're a retailer or banking or something like that, and you're thinking, you know, you've got this vision of, to start off it will do this and that, but we want to grow that, and then we'd like people to be able to add things and add the family members and be able to personalize and etc etc. I think if your roadmap is really showing that, and also looking financially at the value, the investment in the value and what return on investment you're going to get out of the product, would probably help you make that decision. So I've worked with organizations where they're sort of like, somebody's got enough inherent knowledge to know that an app would be the right thing, but then sort of looking at the roadmap and thinking, why would we go down that native route, which is going to cost us more, but actually we want to get, you know, if more people are sort of behaving in a mobile way potentially, then actually making that mobile experience as good as possible would probably sort of point you in the native direction. And you see that a lot with retailers, as people are wanting to do things on the go. That actually, the more they want to do things on the go, the less they go onto the website. And like Joe, who shops on his Amazon website at home on the desktop, you know, actually, I think those things would help inform that decision.
We've got time for one last question, and then I want to ask you all your personal opinions and run the poll again to see if we've changed anyone's mind from the start. So it's a really good question as well. And I think, Joe, we've spoken about this at length before. How does developer availability affect the native versus hybrid decision? So take it away, Joe.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the big things that skews it towards hybrid, because there are a lot more JavaScript and web developers kicking around the market than there are Swift developers, or I mean, potentially I suppose there are a lot of Java developers, but Java developers that have or Kotlin developers that have a front end focus. So yes, I think developer availability and developer skill sets are absolutely key when it comes to these kind of things. That's not to say that people can't be upskilled and sort of pick up the different language and that kind of thing, but if you're wanting to sort of pick someone off the street, the chances are they're going to have more JavaScript experience than, say, Swift experience.
Do you think they're more because there's more demand for hybrid then, or is it just that more people they want to be more generalist? Or I'm not quite sure how to. I'm not a total techie. So why do you think there are more?
I do apologise.
Sorry, say again.
So I think the availability comes from web development. So you have a lot of web developers out there, and Node increasingly as a JavaScript option for backend development means that as a language, it's taken over sort of everywhere, which means that there's much more availability.
Or better or worse, I guess. Right. So did you call your phone a friend for that one, Joe?
Yeah.
So
like, was that a real landline?
That's an actual landline, which means it's either telesales or my in-laws, because they're the only people who, but anyway.
Coming across as very archaic, aren't you, Joe?
Don't like any of this technology.
Right, I'm going to run the poll again, just the, hopefully, maybe not. Oh, someone's done all the buttons for me. I didn't need to press it. Excellent. So, right, it's just one question this time. What would your preferred approach be? Is it native? Is it hybrid? You don't know. It depends, or other, if you're really that indecisive. And then I'll ask all of the panel for their sort of final closing views as well. Who wants to do the countdown drum roll this time?
How long are you giving everybody? It won't take long.
As long as your tune takes. Yeah, I think we'll close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and closed. Oof. 71%. It depends.
It changed.
71%. It depends.
Oh, it's changed.
Yeah. So
it's great.
So actually, yeah, native 29%. Nobody said hybrid. So I don't know, but we've definitely changed it.
That makes me feel like people would have native because they think it would be the best experience, but they think it depends on. That's really, really interesting from the beginning. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
And Joe, I mean, you're the anti-app, write a progressive web app, but I tell you what, I'll give you sort of 30 seconds to wrap up each and give us your, is it hybrid, is it native, or what's your personal opinion? Joe first.
So I'm definitely in the it depends camp, but I would be questioning, do you need an app? Can you put it on the web? Because you'll get something out there more quickly and you'll get some sort of instant feedback loop. But there are certainly circumstances where a native app will give you the best experience for the user.
Colin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm similar to Joe. If you do have to go down the path where you're writing an app, build a hybrid one. Make sure your libraries that you're writing in JavaScript are going to be portable to the web, and actually save yourself some time.
Leonie?
Yeah, I am a depends. I would have a preference for native where possible, depending on the reasons. But I am actually sort of thinking for in the future whether we will have a need of these particular products, like you say, where people are doing more things through SMS, through voice recognition, etc. And actually, if a website could do the job well for altogether, then potentially maybe that is the best way to go.
So I guess I'll close with my opinion. Since we started sort of collecting all the insights, interviewing people, getting involved in lots of different projects, I have completely changed my mind. And I am now a 100% native.
Oh.
And the reasons for that are because if you want to integrate with, future devices like Apple Watch and other peripherals and have that seamless user experience, it's a real pain to do that in a web view. I'm a little concerned that web views are becoming a little bit too insecure. Your JavaScript's munged up, but it's still stuck there and people have access to it. Yes, testability, I guess there's probably a trade-off between both. But also the web developers that are kind of moving over into this native world, they don't really understand the capabilities of the devices that they're working on. But actually, by writing some native code, it helps you learn and understand and experience that. So I'm now in the native camp. So it's been really enjoyable doing this because I've completely changed my my outlook on it.
That's fascinating. Oh.
Thank you so much, guys, for today's session. We have got another session tomorrow at 10:15, Data Ops on Azure, if anyone wants to join that. But yeah, thank you so much. I will be sending out the recording probably in the next couple of days, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone.